Well, I've talked to a lot of parents who have some very sad kids because they wanted to watch the opening ceremony, and you deprived them of that, France. So well done.
Welcome to Watch Mojo. And today we're counting down our picks for the most infamous controversies at the Paralympic, Summer, and Winter Olympic Games. We'll explore the shocking incident and the possible repercussions. We won't be examining incidents that involved mass tragedies, such as the 1972 Munich massacre.
Okay, let's do the backflip.
Number 30, Canada's drone scandal, Paris, France. This scandal is certainly a modern one. Canada's women's soccer team was found guilty of using a drone to spy on New Zealand's team's practices.
It was New Zealand that initially reported this to police and asked as well for the IOC Integrity Unit to take a look at this.
This verdict came after Canada had defeated both New Zealand and France, but the 6-point deduction the team suffered from the violation left a challenging road ahead for the rest of the games. Coach Bev Priestman was given a year-long ban as a result and quickly issued an apology to the players.
And again, I would just like to apologise to our country, but also to New Zealand.
The Canadian team had brought home the gold in women's soccer in Tokyo in 2021, but this uncovered misconduct unfortunately casts a dark shadow over the team's legacy.
It does not reflect Canadians or who we are as competitors.
Number 29, banned for doping before it was illegal, Nagano, Japan. The 1998 Winter Olympics was meant to be a celebration for Ross Rebliati. After all, the Canadian was the first gold medalist in the debuting sport of snowboarding, winning in the men's giant slalom event. But then, Rebliati tested positive for trace amounts of THC. After a vote by the International Olympic Committee, or IOC, he was disqualified. However, cannabis had not been banned by the IOC at that point.
The Canadian Olympic Association is hereby requested to withdraw and return the medal.
Canada appealed the decision, which was successful, and Rebliati could wear his medal with tarnished pride. The IOC then put through a ban on the substance 2 months later. Due to this drama, while Rebliati enjoyed the celebrity, he was added to the US's no-fly list, which damaged his snowboarding career.
I might have to wear a gas mask from now on, but whatever.
Number 28, badminton players match fixing, London, England.
8 elite athletes who were deliberately and flagrantly losing their matches.
It's rare when 2 teams collude with each other to fix a result in sport, but it's unprecedented for 4 to do so in the same event. At the 2012 Summer Olympics in London, England, multiple women's doubles badminton teams did just that. In Group A, China and South Korea were undefeated when they faced each other in the last match. The same situation happened for Group C with Indonesia and another South Korean pairing. During these bouts, the athletes seemingly threw the matches by making many errors. They did this to get a more favorable matchup in the quarterfinals. After the Badminton World Federation examined the matches, they ruled the accused players had broken the rules and were disqualified from the tournament.
And as for the Chinese, South Korean and Indonesian teams, they could face further sanctions from the IOC.
Number 27, the Kosak gesture, Moscow, Soviet Union. Leading up to the 1980 Summer Olympics in Moscow, Soviet Union, Poland's Władysław Kosakiewicz was one of the favorites to take gold in the pole vault after top finishes in several competitions. When he competed at the prestigious event, he, along with any other non-Soviet athlete, was booed and whistled at by the crowd. Yet even with that against him, the Polish vaulter achieved a 5.78-meter jump, taking the gold and breaking a world record. However, during several jumps, Kosakiewicz defied the hostility by showing the bras d'honneur, also known as the Italian salute, which is seen as the equivalent of whipping out the bird. Soviet officials demanded Kosakiewicz be stripped of the medal, which didn't happen. Number 26, Team Great Britain Equestrian Scandal, Paris, France. Naturally, horse safety should always be of the utmost importance in equestrian sports. But unfortunately, an abusive incident was uncovered surrounding a member of Great Britain's Olympic team.
And Charlotte Dujardin is provisionally suspended for a period of 6 months.
An incriminating video was released of gold medalist Charlotte Dujardin mistreating her steed during a training session. This caused massive waves, and the situation was further investigated by PETA. Dujardin pulled out of the games as a result, but the team still managed to clinch the gold in equestrian eventing.
Suddenly, an announcement from her that she's been forced to withdraw because of this investigation into her conduct.
While this scandal was certainly an unfortunate one, it's crucial that animal safety issues are brought to the forefront of such athletic events.
But this is not the first time there has been an issue of welfare of an animal within the sport.
Number 25, convicted Dutch volleyball player, Paris, France. The Netherlands beach volleyball team received many boos from the crowd when player Steven van de Velde entered the court. Van de Velde was sentenced to 4 years in prison after having been found guilty of assault against a girl he had met online. When sentenced, the judge had commented that his, quote, hopes of representing his country now lie as a shattered dream. But shockingly, after serving only 13 months of his time, Van de Velde was selected by Dutch Olympic officials to join the team. Clearly, the consequences of his actions were ultimately minimal, though the media and audience backlash was considerable. Number 24, Surya Bonali's backflip, Nagano, Japan. Running up to the 1998 Winter Olympics in Nagano, Japan, Frances Bonali hit disaster as she ruptured her Achilles tendon. Amazingly, the figure skater still competed in the short program but had to adapt her routine. Rather than play it safe, Bonali became the first person at the Olympics to land a stunning backflip on one blade. However, this maneuver has been banned by the International Skating Union since 1976. As such, she had points deducted. Regardless, Bonali celebrated to the audience for achieving this impressive feat, turning her back to the judges. One official approached the judges and told them Bonali's behavior was unacceptable, even though she came in 10th. When combined with free skating, Bonali went down in Winter Olympic history with her performance.
People were just crazy about it.
Number 23, Greg Louganis' Head Injury, Seoul, South Korea. Representing the United States in diving at the 1988 Summer Olympics in Seoul, South Korea, Louganis looked to defend his 2 golds from the previous event. However, during the springboard, he struck his head on the board during a dive, causing a wound and a concussion. While hindsight dictates he shouldn't have continued competing with a concussion, he did, and won 2 golds. In 1995, Louganis came out with the news that he was diagnosed with HIV 6 months before the 1988 event. Straight away, people began criticizing him for not stating his diagnosis at the time as he bled in the water, leading to fears of infection. However, scientists disputed that anyone could have contracted the virus this way. Number 22, Spain's Paralympic basketball team, Sydney, Australia. At the 2000 Summer Paralympic Games in Sydney, Australia, Spain's men's basketball team in the intellectual disability class took the gold. Not long after the event closed, the truth came out.
The Spanish team were I think, laughed at and labelled the most unsporting team in history. I mean, unsporting is the wrong word, it's a euphemism for cheating.
Undercover journalist and member of Spain's winning team, Carlos Ribagorda, told the press that the team hadn't had the necessary medical tests to show their disability. Only 2 of the 12 players were deemed to have an intellectual disability. Ribagorda claimed that Fernando Martín Vicente, an official for Spain's Paralympic organization, had purposely signed up non-disabled athletes to secure gold.
It was a false medal. It was a false national anthem.
The European nation was disqualified, and Vicente resigned. He was later found guilty of fraud in 2013 and fined €5,400. This scandal caused intellectual disability events to be banned for 2 Paralympics.
They'd lost a spectacular gamble, and in doing so had given the International Paralympic Committee its greatest PR disaster of all time.
Number 21, China's underage gymnasts, Sydney, Australia. After helping China secure a bronze at the 1999 World Artistic Gymnastics Championships women's team event, Dong Fengxiao helped them repeat the achievement at the 2000 Summer Olympics for the women's artistic team all around. Still wanting to be involved after a severe injury forced her to retire, Dong signed up to be a technical official at the 2008 Summer Olympics. However, her date of birth was different from the one she was registered under in 2000. According to the newer birth year, Dong would have been 14 years old in Sydney, Australia, 2 years younger than the minimum age set in 1997. After an investigation, China was disqualified from the 1999 Worlds and the 2000 Olympics and had to return their medals. Number 20. Many concerns over the 2020 Olympics, Tokyo, Japan. The COVID pandemic not only pushed the original 2020 date of the Tokyo Olympics to the following summer, it also brought up issues of contagious spread. However, that's just the tip of the iceberg.
There is a local transmission, and if we send an inconsistent signal that we should celebrate the Olympic, then people will be confused.
Various events are set to occur in Fukushima, despite possible safety concerns from the 2011 nuclear disaster.
Our Geiger counter reads radiation levels 100 times higher than it should be.
Tokyo Bay's water quality has also been questioned with respect to its warm temperature, repellent smell, and reported high levels of fecal coliform bacteria. which could result in typhoid and dysentery. Meanwhile, asbestos was found in one of the competition's buildings. The game's logos and stadium designs were accused of plagiarism, Russia allegedly conducted pre-cyber reconnaissance, and there have been issues regarding politics and worker rights. Right before the games, one of the event's composers resigned and the opening ceremony director was fired when past comments came to light. Number 19. Zola Budd collides with Mary Decker, Los Angeles, California, USA. There was a lot of hype preceding the 3,000-meter event at the 1984 Summer Olympics, as many were excited to watch South Africa's Zola Budd, who was competing for Great Britain, race American world champion Mary Decker. Unfortunately, it was a major letdown. They repeatedly bumped into each other, and Decker went down hard following a collision, forcing her to be carried off the field. The barefoot Budd was troubled by the incident and finished a disappointing 7th. The media didn't know who to blame, and each runner earned a degree of criticism. Most fell on Budd, but a later International Association of Athletics Federation's investigation found that the collision was not her fault. To this day, Decker blames it on her inexperience in pack running. Number 18. Making way for the Games, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. In 2009, Rio de Janeiro won the bid to host the 2016 Summer Games. There was just one problem. Working-class favela Vila Autodromo was in the spot where they wanted the Olympic Village. So they attempted to kick everyone out. The favela inhabitants received eviction notices, reducing the area's population by 83%. Those remaining formed a civil society and rejected eviction, often coming face-to-face with riot police and their community's literal destruction. The billionaire owner of the real estate development firm Carvalho Hoskin further invited controversy with media comments about the indigenous population. It's estimated that 60,000 locals were displaced for the village's construction.
Swimming pools, tennis courts, everything you can imagine. This is a 5-star accommodation environment that I've never seen in a games village before.
Number 17. South Korea bribes judges, Seoul, South Korea. The 1988 Summer Olympics were held in Seoul, South Korea. Representing his home country was light middleweight boxer Park Si-hun, who faced American Roy Jones Jr. in the gold medal match. Jones landed 86 punches against Park, with Park only landing 32. Despite this, Park was awarded the win in a controversial 3-2 decision, prompting an intense outcry. A judge allegedly admitted Jones should have won, but that he voted for Park to avoid disappointing South Korea. Multiple judges involved with the finals were subsequently prohibited from boxing, and an IOC investigation found that South Korean officials had won the judges over after taking them out for dinner. A new scoring system was later integrated to prevent future issues.
When you can take a kid, 19 years old, he defeats his rival clearly, and you rob him, it really eliminates the integrity of that sport.
Number 16. The American Swimmers Scandal, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. During the 2016 Rio Olympics, various American swimmers, including Ryan Lochte, claimed they had been robbed at gunpoint. It didn't take long for the so-called truth to come out. The athletes, some of whom were reportedly intoxicated, had allegedly vandalized a gas station and urinated in public, prompting a security guard confrontation. They then paid the guards for the damages. Deemed Lochte-gate, the incident saw the eponymous swimmer charged for falsely reporting a crime.
Guy pulled out his gun, he cocked it, put it to my forehead, he said, "Get down," and I was like, I put my hands up, I was like, whatever.
He was also suspended for 10 months by the U.S. Olympic Committee and banned from its training centers. However, a later USA Today investigation brought up the possibility that the swimmers were actually innocent of vandalism and may have actually been coerced into handing over the money. Number 15. Boris Onischenko's Magic Épée, Montreal, Quebec, Canada.
After the elimination of the Soviet team as a result of Onischenko's disqualification, hopes begin to revive.
As a distinguished yet aging modern pentathlete and respected figure in the Soviet Union, 38-year-old Onischenko had a considerable reputation to uphold in his homeland. The pressure to perform, particularly in the Cold War era of sport, was too much to bear, however, and caused the former Army major to cheat, eventually leading to his downfall. desperate to match his previous silver medal performance, he altered his épée to register hits even when he wasn't making contact with his opponent.
A touch is registered when the foil tip hits the opponent with a force of at least 500 grams.
Just as quickly as this plot was discovered, Boris the Cheat was stripped of his sporting honors and personally reprimanded by Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev, therefore suffering the very fall from grace he was trying to avoid. Number 14. Angel Matos kicks a referee. Beijing, China. Cuban Taekwondo fighter Angel Matos took home gold at the 2000 Sydney Olympics, and following a disappointing 2004 outcome, he was looking to reclaim some glory in Beijing. Instead, he was permanently kicked out of the sport. During the bronze medal match, Matos sustained an injury and took a brief medical timeout called Kich. Kich runs out after 1 minute, so when this time elapsed and Matos hadn't returned to the ring, the referee called the game and awarded the win to Matos' opponent. In return, Matos kicked him in the face. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Matos was subsequently banned for life by the World Taekwondo Federation, effectively ending his professional career. Number 13. The Salt Lake City bid scandal. Salt Lake City, Utah, USA. Salt Lake City really wanted to host the Olympics and had bid 4 times to no avail. Finally, their luck turned around in 1995, and they were given the 2002 Winter Olympics. However, allegations of bribery soon surfaced. IOC officials had reportedly accepted money from the Salt Lake City Organizing Committee, and it wasn't the only time. After future digging, it was found that IOC officials had accepted bribes for both the 1998 and 2000 Olympics. The controversy launched numerous investigations, including one by the U.S. Department of Justice. 15 bribery charges were laid, and many prominent officials either resigned their posts or were officially expelled for corruption. Number 12. The 2002 figure skating scandal. Salt Lake City, Utah, USA. The Salt Lake City Games were mired in controversy. If it wasn't charges of bribery, it was a reportedly fixed figure skating competition. The pair's figure skating event ended in trouble when Russia won gold over Canada, despite Canada's arguably better performance. The media criticized the judges for their decision, and suspicion landed on French judge Marie-Reine Legugne.
As soon as I had put down my pen, I started to suffer from a series of attacks, physical, verbal, and the worst, moral.
She supposedly broke down when confronted by the technical committee's chair, and later admitted she'd been coerced into voting for the Russians.
She said she was under pressure and that it was not her own opinion.
However, she later retracted these statements, stating she'd genuinely believed the Russians had won. Though an investigation into the event was never launched, Legugne's judging career was over. Number 11. The 1972 men's basketball final. Munich, Germany. The American men's basketball team was the stuff of Olympics legend, having won every gold medal event since 1936. They were also completely undefeated, with a 63-0 Olympics record. And then, the Cold War was brought to the basketball court, as Team USA faced the Soviet Union in the 1972 Munich finals. Following an intense game, the final 3 seconds were a complete mess in terms of technical gameplay. And without going into complex detail, the USSR edged ahead for a 51-50 victory. Team USA wasn't happy and protested the outcome. They refused to accept silver, and the surviving team members continue to refuse both the outcome of the game and the medals today. Number 10. Displacement in Beijing. Beijing, China. As far back as 2000, Chinese officials were reportedly implementing, quote, environmental improvement projects, aka the systematic demolition of Beijing's impoverished areas, resulting in an estimated displacement of 1.5 million people for the 2008 Summer Games.
These people have been forced out of their homes to make way for profitable real estate projects.
Although local government claimed they only moved between 6,000 and 15,000, all with compensation, numerous reports exposed the mistreatment of those unwilling to shift by heavy-handed police. Beijing's floating population, consisting of rural migrants, the homeless, and other so-called second-class citizens, were most at risk from this purported social cleansing.
For now, many live in neighborhoods curtained off by grey concrete walls. built, authorities say, to make Beijing prettier.
It was reported that $40 billion was spent on Olympic or corporate infrastructure, while human rights were allegedly ignored, adding to an already large list of controversies surrounding the Beijing Games.
Human rights groups have repeatedly expressed concern over the evictions and say Beijing is not living up to its promises that the Olympics will improve the country's rights record.
Number 9. Jim Thorpes disqualification, Stockholm, Sweden. Reportedly dubbed the greatest athlete in the world by the King of Sweden, this legendary all-rounder took gold in both the pentathlon and decathlon at the 1912 Summer Games, setting records that endured well into the 20th century.
There must be something in the Thorpe legend for people to still be talking about him 50 years after he's dead.
The Native American and European's athletic career is defined by tales of his nonchalant excellence. His winning the high jump in mismatched shoes is one of many anecdotes. Yet his feats will always be tainted by the IOC's elitist and potentially racist attempts to punish him for violating their Victorian rules on amateurism, rules that white athletes frequently abused without consequence.
As far as I'm concerned, he's a Simon pure athlete. You mustn't take those medals away from him, gentlemen. You mustn't.
Under serious pressure from Thorpe supporters, the IOC did eventually yield on the subject by returning Thorpe's medals in the early 1980s.
They were presented to his 7 surviving children.
Number 8. The African boycott, Montreal, Quebec, Canada. During the 1976 Montreal Games, South Africa was in the height of apartheid, a system of racial segregation based on the concept of white supremacy that saw major oppression against black Africans. In 1976, the New Zealand All Blacks rugby team toured South Africa, and dozens of African countries requested that the IOC ban New Zealand from the then upcoming Olympics. In their opinion, the controversial tour indirectly condoned the regime, and they wanted New Zealand punished. The IOC refused, so 29 countries protested the Olympics and failed to show. This prevented the former 1,500-meter world record holder from competing, as Filbert Bayi hailed from Tanzania, one of the countries protesting the Games. Number 7. Blood in the Water match, Melbourne, Australia. Just a few weeks before this water polo match, Soviet tanks had rumbled into Budapest to end a revolution that claimed about 3,000 Hungarians.
I was considered to be from the foreign class background, and when the communist system came into power here, I had to find the opportunity to make my way in the world.
Hoping to restore their country's pride, the Hungarian team planned to rile up the Russians, get physical, and force them into rash decisions.
A lot of people ask why it is that way. And I think that water polo is simply in our blood.
With Hungary leading 4-0 late in the game, the Russians took matters into their own hands. Hungarian player Ervin Zador was struck in the eye, sending the hundreds of Hungarians in the crowd into a frenzy that required police intervention. In a bittersweet finish, the Hungarian team took home the gold, but they could never escape the match's political subtext, forcing many members to find refuge in less oppressive lands.
The Hungarians are declared 4-0 winners. The semi-final showdown instantly makes headlines across the globe.
Number 6. Ben Johnson doping, Seoul, South Korea.
For Canadians, a classic where were you moment. Then, the positive drug test.
The men's 100 meters at the 1988 Summer Olympics may have been labeled the dirtiest race in history, but it was also one of the most enthralling to watch.
That was the Olympics. I mean, that year it was all about Ben Johnson versus Carl Lewis.
6 members of that all-star lineup were implicated in other doping controversies post-race, but it was Johnson, the world record holder after his 9.79-second race, who will forever be defined by the steroid use he began in 1981.
Ben wins! Johnson! And the time is 9.79!
The Canadian was open about his long-term cheating, and rightly stripped of his gold medal, yet is still irked to be the only one punished when others also failed drug tests.
Come and run after me, Ben. I'm right here.
He's even claimed the IOC only selectively cracks down on the pervasive doping culture in athletics. But even if Johnson's allegations are true, we may never fully know.
Regardless, if you like, of what happened afterwards, the experience of that moment, the sort of the emotions that it evoked, are still there.
Number 5, Tanya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan, Lillehammer, Norway.
Many of you will be unable to forgive me for that. It will be difficult to forgive myself.
Containing jealousy, a hitman, and an unrelenting desire for sporting success, it's no surprise a feature-length film adaptation of this event was released.
Large man, 6'2", 200 pounds, came running out, just kind of crouched when he got to her, hit her a couple times with some type of weapon.
During a practice that was crucial for determining the U.S. Olympic figure skating team, a henchman hired by Tanya Harding's ex-husband and bodyguard struck Nancy Kerrigan in the leg. Since she was then the sport's poster girl, the attack was orchestrated to intentionally put her out of the '94 Games. Branded as the do-anything-for-gold skater, Harding's alleged knowledge of the attack was soon exposed. However, she was still allowed to compete at the Olympics. Fortunately, Kerrigan recovered and landed silver at Lillehammer, while Harding, placed 8th, was fined, received 3 years of probation, and never skated competitively again.
But if she were here today, what would you want to say to her about all of this?
Well, if she'd let me, I'd love to give her a hug.
Number 4, the Russian doping scandal, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil.
It's almost spooky.
Details of Russia's alleged state-sponsored systematic doping came to light in 2014, but they were expanded upon when ex-Russian anti-doping official Grigory Rodchenkov provided an insider's look into a conspiracy that forced him to flee to the U.S.
According to Onischenko, he would feed the athletes these banned substances via alcohol. He even mixed special cocktails for them.
Exploiting the increased access granted by their hosting of the Games, Sochi 2014 competitors were reportedly allowed to dope without consequence, while their urine samples were exchanged in covert operations carried out by Rodchenkov and others.
It's a fact that we cannot prove doping among athletes through our evaluation, but we do have an indication of how widespread doping is.
He claimed that at least 15 medalists from the 2014 Winter Olympics might be implicated. Due to these supposedly Kremlin-sanctioned schemes, Russia was suspended from world sports events. They were also investigated before the 2016 Summer Olympics, resulting in the IOC ejecting 110 team members.
But pressure is building to make Russia's sanctions stick much longer.
Number 3, the U.S. boycotts Moscow Olympics, Moscow, Soviet Union.
The United States Olympic Committee voted to boycott the Summer Olympic Games in Moscow.
In response to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan beginning in 1979, U.S. President Jimmy Carter led an international boycott that doomed his period in office and triggered the Soviet Union's own boycott of the LA Games in 1984.
We fought and we did our best to preserve the Games in Moscow in 1980, and we have to do the same to preserve the Games in 1984 in Los Angeles.
While the reasons behind this action were righteous and well supported, the U.S. enlisted Muhammad Ali's help and ultimately 65 nations joined up, the boycott threatened the Olympic movement by embroiling the Games in the political maneuvering of two world powers.
Well, I'm very disappointed, but I feel that it's probably the only thing that our country can do as a unit.
25 angry U.S. athletes even sued the government for denying them a dream they worked so hard towards. And yet, Carter stuck to his morals, strengthening a stance that would later be described by the Soviet Union as, quote, anti-Soviet hysteria.
You can look anywhere around the globe and you'll find a problem where help is needed, where we could jump on a bandwagon, if you like. And I think it's just a little unfortunate that we've chosen now the Olympic Games to have a go at.
Number 2, Olympics Black Power Salute, Mexico City, Mexico.
My head bowed, my fist went up in the air.
It's one of the 20th century's most powerful images. During the medal ceremony for the 200-meter race at the 1968 Summer Olympics, Americans Tommy Smith and John Carlos, shoeless and with their heads bowed, each thrust up a gloved hand.
Say it loud! On the 16th of October 1968, Tommy Smith and John Carlos's controversial demonstration stunned the world.
Smith said it was meant to symbolize human rights for all, but others believed it was in support of Black Power. Expelled and met with hostility when they returned home, They stood by the political statement, claiming it was their moral obligation to sacrifice their individual reputations to send a message to those watching.
We always had the happy face and the USA all across our chest to give indication that everything is smooth in America. But in fact, it wasn't smooth.
Meanwhile, the third man in the photograph, Peter Norman, was an Olympics pariah for decades thereafter because he showed his support by donning an Olympic Project for Human Rights badge. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1. The Nazi Olympics. Berlin, Germany.
On virtually every other banner we saw, there was a swastika.
For 2 weeks in 1936 Berlin, Nazi prosperity and hospitality blinded the world, while Germany's precisely directed propaganda campaign obscured their anti-Semitic, discriminatory, and expansionist policies from view.
How can a Jew be good enough to win the Olympics that I would have had to be afraid for my life, I'm sure.
Numerous nations that would form the Allied powers were present for carefully manufactured demonstrations of fervent German pride, while arguments stating participation in the Games were tantamount to an endorsement of fascism went unheard. And so, despite mentions of a potential boycott, the Games began. Medals were even won by some Jewish and black athletes, but it was Hitler who truly prospered. The Reich Chancellor turned the Games into an advertising campaign for his administration, with some asserting that he successfully manipulated European powers into a complacency that allowed the Nazi regime to spread across Europe in subsequent years.
Eure Schule wird die ganze Nation gehen.
Which scandal do you think takes the gold? Let us know in the comments below.
How is the best boxer here not wearing a gold medal?
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.